We urbanists, architects, designers, we had been obsessed with the subject of a city. We used to learn that to look at cities as an object in a more traditional way, especially architects and urban planners, as if it's something that you can manipulate and shape. But the city is something far more complex. The city is an addition of layers that interact between each other. A city is a collection of ecosystems. A city is also a collection of communities, human and non-human communities. If you look in a wider perspective, each person that lives in a city is a city itself. It seems that there's been like a kind of a space race to find out how to make a better city. But what is true is that this has been our biggest creation as a human species. And I think that is something that we need to perfect. I was born in Caracas, Venezuela, but I was raised in a smaller city. Being a country so rich in oil is both a blessing and a curse. So the curse of the oil in Venezuela was that it stopped us from developing a solid local economy. It was easier and cheaper to basically import almost everything. By the time I had to go to university, I decided to study urban planning. So during the years I studied in Caracas, Barcelona was the reference point, like on quality of public space, on the way in which transport networks in the city was organized, the density of the city, the urban model, not only for kids studying in Venezuela about urban planning, but for the world, it's been Barcelona. That's because Barcelona is the place where this idea of modern urbanization was born.
How are you thinking about preserving or including the culture of your region? About 10 years ago, the city of Barcelona really was thinking about how do we make our city more sustainable using digital fabrication. And the Barcelona Fab Lab, which is situated in an architectural environment, right, an architectural education environment, really took up the lead on this and developed this idea of the Fab Cities.
Thanks to a project that we did with the Space 10 and IKEA, we had to create a network of collaborators to develop for 5 days a project that was based on taking the resources that we could find in the streets, put them back into Fab Labs of the Poblenou, and turn them into new products. In some cases, we were finding IKEA furniture that was in the streets, and then we were working with IKEA designers on redesigning that furniture to become something else.
Yes, because the whole challenge is about making it has to be relevant. If it's not relevant, then we're just making more things.
It's not just about digital fabrication, it's about public-private partnerships that bring together the makers in a community, the private sector businesses in a community, and the governance of a community to really reimagine over the next 40 years, how do we live and work and maintain our cities sustainably.
We need to rethink the way we make, and that's what the challenge is about. We need to make things that are made to be made again.
Thanks to that project, we basically identified that the Poblenou could be claimed to be a Fab City prototype. This potential Fab City prototype is something that we also started to export in a way, no? And then other cities like in Seoul or in Paris, they were looking at to take a similar approach, and it's to identify that you don't need to really to take the entire city, but you can look at at the neighborhood of the city and start to prototype different ways in which people relate with materials. So Public Note really, I think, like a trigger a lot of attention. The city council named officially the Maker District. Mayor of the city of Barcelona, he publicly committed to make Barcelona locally productive and globally connected by 2054. Today we have 41 cities, big, small, even regions. And ever since, we have been having cities joining every year as part of a Fab City network.
You're kind of the orchestrator of all of this, and you're also on an island. What do you sort of envision, about the Fab City structure, and what are your aspirations for Bali? Because it's so different.
Bali has been a place where Fab Cities becomes even more relevant. Being an island is self-contained and it's an ideal setting to test which products we need to put in and what needs to go out. Right now, together with local partners, we started a company called Meaningful Design Group to test this kind of a distributed economy. What is the better place than an archipelago of 17,000 islands, and some of them very remote? Wow. To really test this self-sufficiency, right? So we have a really experimental playground here, and we're going to start small. One of the challenges will be to look at how we can identify a potential Fab City prototype here in Bali, and I think that we're going to see some of that when we look at Jimbaran.
We are now in the farm, part of Jimbaran Hub. This is like limestone hills where the people generally don't believe to be able to plant anything. So it's like cannot do anything because it's limestone. The idea having Jimbaran Hub is actually a place to prototype different technologies. So in this prototype, it's basically to prove to people that we can do it if we want to. We need to have the want.
In the soil, through the years, the component of the soil is changing. Mm-hmm. Like after the rain, it becomes acidic.
Yeah.
So we don't see it until the plant dies.
Okay.
If chili is 4 months period, you lose 3 months of your time of planting.
We can install some of these sensors. This is developed in a Fab Lab in Barcelona, and with this sensor you can measure certain conditions of the environment. The sensor connects to the computer with the USB. This is a movement to help people like you to put these tools in order to understand better how your environment is behaving, and then how to help you to grow food better. It can measure light, noise, air temperature, humidity, barometric pressure. So this is where the sensor is located. One of the key elements of this being open source. The design is completely available, and then with a local capacities, when in a local Fab Lab, we can then have some farmers plugging in more sensors that they need, attach more sensors, right? It's modular.
It is something that the farmers really need. Mm-hmm. It's just that we need to have a special program, a training for them to have a transfer knowledge from your equipment to become their habits.
In the first 3 industrial revolutions, we left so much of the population behind. We created, especially in this last revolution, the digital revolution, we created an enormous divide. We did not pay attention to the social aspects of technology. We used the technologies to get a few people or a very small percentage of the population, very rich. As we stand on the threshold of this next digital revolution, which will be very transformative to all of our industries, we have to be inclusive, right? So we have to bring in communities that otherwise wouldn't have access.
The question is like how the digital technologies fit into this game. Bringing Fab City to Bali and into Asia, I think that's what we're trying to do, is to learn a different way of doing it, and not to import what Europe has been doing, or what the North has been doing, or what the West has been doing. Bali was the refuge of kings and royalties and artists and priests when the incursion of the Arabs happened a few centuries ago. Thanks to that process of being a refuge place of royalties, the royalties came with with the best craftsmen and craftwomen and artists, and it's present almost everywhere in the island. It's incredible how it still survives even under this very aggressive industrial economy.
Something.
Welcome to Bona Alit. Ibu Manggar, ya.
Let's go in?
Okay.
What is the materials that you're using mostly in making your instruments?
Anything.
Anything?
Yeah, sometimes from the fish, sometimes from the buffalo, wood,
maybe
silver.
can you show us from the fish, maybe?
From the fish, this
Yeah.
one.
We have to wet your feet here. So this is an instrument made out of bones.
Yeah.
And how you call it, this instrument?
Not yet.
It doesn't have a name.
No.
Is that you are not replicating an instrument, you're making a new instrument.
Yeah, we just like to do
That's the
something.
really cool thing about it.
Gato, in a community of makers also in Indonesia, they are developing open platform for people to prototype electronics.
It's an honor for us to meet Aji. Like we see with the same principle, with a different material, with a different principle. No, it amazed me like so much.
Each one of these is different. What they are doing, I find like a fascinating, is that you design your machine that makes sound, which is similar as you design your machine that makes sound.
Yeah, yeah.
So I believe that this kind of a shared open source repositories of knowledge that we are doing inside Fab Labs and Fab Cities, I think that offers endless possibilities for any new city or community jumping into a movement like the maker movement or to Fab Cities, no?
The real invention of digital fabrication is about 4 billion years ago. That's when evolutionarily the ribosome emerged. That's the molecular assembler that makes us. When the ribosome assembles amino acids, it does it just effectively just like a child playing with Lego. So we've been studying how to take little building blocks, and you're made out of 20 building blocks, the amino acids, little building blocks of functional materials, and assemble them. And that ranges from work on government research programs to make integrated electronics that way, to work with Airbus on jumbo jets, or Oldendorf on ships, or Toyota on cars, assembling them out of these building blocks, or NASA on spaceships. And in doing that, we've set world records for the highest performance materials. And so the real profound revolution in digitizing fabrication is not codes in the computer, it's actually putting codes and computation into the materials. And that's at the heart of the research we're doing here.
So we were approached a number of years ago to figure out better ways of assembling jet aircraft. And jet aircraft are kind of the quintessential high-performance structure. When I say high performance, I mean something that's very strong, but also extremely lightweight, so you can build things like planes out of it. And one way to do that is to break the structure down or discretize it into individual identical elements, which we call voxels. Voxel just means 3D pixel, so volumetric pixel. And the voxels connect together and they form a lattice. And what's really interesting about these lattices is if you design the joints right, you can build lattice structures that will behave like a monolithic material. So you have all of these little discrete elements that are all in this case, they're all bolted together. But if you were to put this in a machine and squish it, or twist it, or bend it, or stretch it, it would behave as if it were one single material. Which is really profound, because it means you can build large structures out of tiny pieces and you can predict their performance. And an issue with that is that if you want to build a jumbo jet, you need a machine bigger than a jumbo jet. And a machine bigger than a jumbo jet that is able to accurately locate parts to a very high degree of detail in that space. So an interesting project was to build these robots. They're called Billies. The robot can navigate along the lattice structure, so it hops from voxel to voxel, and then it can pick the voxels up and place them. The Billy robot itself is far smaller than that total voxel structure.
We've been doing a number of test projects with these. One interesting one was a collaboration with Toyota where we made a super high efficiency race car. They spent a year developing it. In a month, we were able to assemble them from these building blocks. And then one of the fun things that happened, were not fun. It was fun.
It was a crash.
It was rainy the first day the car went out on the track. Wasn't good visibility, and the driver crashed. Everybody screamed and ran down. And the driver was fine, but the surprise was the car was fine. The whole car just sort of deformed around the crust. Rather than being rigid, the whole car sort of took up the crash. And they later found that also vibration was significantly reduced. And so Toyota has a zero emission vehicle division, really taking seriously the environmental footprint and looking at this for that.
But what's really interesting about this is the Billy itself is made out of voxels. So you can have one Billy that builds another one, and then both Billies will both build Billies, and you have 4, you have 8, and you have 16, and you have 32. And those can all feed back into the, the swarm path planning to assemble a massive structure all at once. And it's how biology works.
So in a way, this is like creating life in non-living materials. It's very much merging the machine and the material beyond what you can do with either additive or subtractive machining today.
I always thought of Neil as like the R&D department of the maker movement. Like he's out 10 years ahead of us, thinking about what's going on and what should happen and what's possible.
This work on digitizing to assemble is removing supply chains. Airbus has this continent-spanning supply chain, and it takes years to develop an airplane. And what we're looking at is by making final assembly the only assembly, bit by bit, you cut out huge swaths of the supply chain. And so it's not all or nothing. It's sort of like a scene change. But it has the impact of removing a lot of global dependency and allowing local manufacturing of these advanced technologies, and so ultimately democratizing them. And so part of this roadmap is really revisiting how economies function.
The fundamental challenge for cities now is to really look how dramatically can transform the way in which they consume resources. How the city stopped being like a big octopus that has these tentacles that are spread all over the planet. We have to think about these complementary ways in which we can be replacing the current materials that actually are not viable. Reinventing our material ecology is one of the fundamental paradigm shifts that we want to enable in the next 10 years.
My name is Oren Hardy. I'm the co-founder of Bamboo U. And that is really aimed at getting designers, architects, engineers, really anybody from around the world who's interested in bamboo construction. Unfortunately, in Asia, bamboo is often seen as a poor man's timber. One of the issues with bamboo is that you've either got to figure out how to use it as a round pole, which is very challenging because it's highly irregular, or you need to process it into something that's homogeneous. So there's all these kind of performance elements to bamboo that we're just starting to understand. And either way requires a high level of technology and intelligence to do so in a way that will be acceptable to the modern context. What we do in Bali is very simple. It's very much based on traditional tools, kind of combined with innovative design ideas. And this is where I think digital fabrication comes into it. And I see that rather than them having to be opposing, there's craftsmanship and working with our hands, and then there's working with robots. I think the most powerful outputs will happen when these things come together.
Hey.
Hi, Tomas. Welcome to Bamboo U. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for welcoming me here. It's an amazing place.
You're very welcome. Should I show you around?
Yes.
I feel like we're a medium between designers that come from all around the world with their own ideas about what they want to shape. The other part of that is we have carpenters who have worked with the material for decades. We created this beautiful platform where those two interact, and there are sparks that fly when that happens. And then we have
I'm seeing your lab and all your tools and how they are used and how people learn by using those tools to prototype. Which technology you think, in terms of making into fabrication, can help into bamboo making?
Bamboo has its limits. We always think that bamboo can bend and you can shape it in whatever form you want, but it doesn't. It will inform you of what it can do.
Yeah.
And you can't design that with a computer. But the computer is unbelievable because it has the ability to show you forms that you would have never thought of before. Mm-hmm. It will inform you of the size of the bamboo, it'll tell you the average, it'll tell you what joints work best maybe.
So you can simulate certain structure,
you can simulate,
performance.
Yeah. And you can't do that by hand. You'd have to spend a lifetime calculating those things and working out with the ruler. What we want to do, and actually I think it would be an amazing project for Bamboo U, would be to find a project that is entirely designed with simulative software, with parametric design, but build that to life and see what happens when the bamboo is actually forced into a form.
William Gibson observed, "The future is here today, it's just not uniformly distributed." In a way, it's almost back to the future. In some ways, it's going back to a traditional, self-sufficient local agrarian economy, but now with advanced technology and global connectivity.
I genuinely believe that arts should always be free for all. The art world in Singapore needs to break away from this elitist feeling of people standing, sipping champagne in art galleries and kind of, it should just be that everyone should be able to go in there and go, hey, this is cool. Just getting that kind of curiosity, making things spark in people's minds, using those beautiful visual literacy techniques to maybe convey meaning in something without the need for words. We need to focus on it more in Singapore. I love the fact that it's still a garden city. It's still super diverse. We do somehow have this crazy melting pot of people from all over the world. We also have really strong cultural roots in our food and our heritage. All of the art could potentially be so rich. You could have an Indian artist who is inspired by Chinese calligraphy, all sorts of things, right? So you actually have such an amazing opportunity, which is quite unique, to then bring out all of these different artists to then say, I am Singaporean, and this is my cultural identity, and I'm going to show it to you by my performance art, by my writing, by my visual arts. When I came to Singapore, I'd already tried to set up something called Mesh. The Mesh is all about a network, and a network connecting the art and tech for good. So that's kind of where it kind of started, this kernel of the idea of bringing people together from different disciplines, different worlds, they then go on and make something. So we did our first showcase and we had 4,000 people turn up and it was like, wow, super amazing. And we had VR in there, AR, all sorts of cool things. Thank you very much. I am Kay Vasey, Chief Connecting Officer. Yes, they do have these titles these days. At Meshfinds, a creative technology studio partnered officially with the United Nations Environment Programme. We were also invited to the UN in Bangkok to then go and address a room full of ministers of environment from across Southeast Asia to then share what augmented reality could do.
And also really emphasizing the fact that the God is in their...
It means that we bring together artists and technologists for the sustainable development of people and our planet. For example, Andre Wee created a vision of a sustainable Singapore for all. So he chose Goal 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, as his focus. And this is actually a still taken from an animation that he created. So at the beginning of the animation, you see a completely normal HDB block. And then as the animation starts to draw you in, you see that there are solar panels on the top of the building. You see that that giant car park really shrinks down and you see these little electric car charging points everywhere. You see the road in the distance is taken away and suddenly there's a beautiful forest and some lakes beyond. The joy of augmented reality is that you can go so close into the animation as it's playing and really dive in and almost feel as if you're there, walking along the street of this beautiful, sustainable vision of Singapore.
So with sustainability being the #1 topic on our minds today, it's very urgent that we need to spread awareness of so many aspects of sustainability. But we're working with the UN to make sure that users do understand in their home language, in their home habits of what sustainability looks like down to a personal level, rather than a conference where everyone's talking about numbers and terms. No, it's not so much more than that.
So makers should be part of the sustainability movement because at Mesh Minds we genuinely believe that artists are the best placed people on the planet to communicate complex topics. They're able to look at kind of stuff that otherwise would sit inside a scientific report and kind of never see the light of day and translate that through pictures or moving images or sound into something that anyone can understand. Most importantly, what's the call to action at the end? I really do herald the joy in the fact that this is the future of the internet, the embodied internet. There is a humongous opportunity here as well as we go into the metaverse thinking through how we can actually navigate through this new embodied internet and tell these sustainability stories. So I do think that art, technology, sustainability is that kind of perfect match, and it's where we need to focus on if we want to get mass kind of global engagement with these important messages about saving our planet.
I am an architect, and I'm from Argentina originally, and the work that you will see, it's work that I do together with my partner, Veronica Salzberg, my wife, partner in crime as well, and we are Monad Studio. Monad Studio is very involved with an evolution of the scale of architecture inwards towards the scale of the body, in a way discovering what are the possibilities of engaging with the human body.
I've seen this online, I've never seen it in real life.
Yeah, I guess in a way it precludes all this kind of mask obsession with COVID, definitely. Even though it's much older than that.
Yeah, what I like about it, because of my work with body sensors, there's a lot of points. It touches the brain, it touches the earlobe, it touches the shoulder, the muscles. One of the things that I'm really interested in, like, how will the future look like? How will our wardrobe gonna look like 20 years ahead in the future? What will we be dressing ourselves? How differently are we using our bodies to interface with certain technologies? I like to set sort of almost a research question and then try to figure it out by really physically building something and then being able to use it and demonstrate it and almost test it on different kinds of people. It's a fascination that I try to investigate for myself as well.
A good example of the transdisciplinary work, as I like to call it, that we've been exploring at Monad Studio is the project that we did recently in collaboration with Anouk Wipprecht, another fellow maker like us, and Viktoria Modesta, who is an extraordinary artist.
I'm Viktoria Modesta, and I'm a bionic pop artist.
She's a really inspirational artist because she took something, let's say, a negative impediment on the body and really turned it all around to what defines her identity as an artist, as a human being.
It was cool to work with Viktoria, who took it to a whole other level, sort of, so that was definitely for me one of the most, I think, interdisciplinary projects.
We just kind of like started talking about the possibilities and just like our passion for fashion and architecture and robotics and just generally like all the possibilities there. And we really pretty much just kind of continuously worked on something ever since.
we decided to create a sonic bustier, something for her torso, which had like elephant tusks in the front.
We were very lucky to be able to sort of, showcase it during Miami Art Basel in a very art context, right? Which you don't really get to do that often when it comes to prosthetics. And I think that that's something that's also really important in just sort of slightly modifying the image of what mobility devices are.
I've been working in sort of art prosthetics for literally like 15 years now, and there's been so many limitations. The biggest change for me that's happened recently is that people with disabilities for the first time are seen as consumers.
So this is the actual shape of Viktoria's limb. And what Jeremy's able to do is he's able to go in here and make any kind of modifications that may be unique to her limb.
So we want a thinner angle. Let's do that.
It's really hard to design around the body too. It's very organic. It's an art form to design for organic shapes like limbs. And that's why it's lacking this creativity in the market. So that's an opportunity for us makers to get into that industry and really drive that. Open source, just get more eyes on it. The more you make it more accessible and digital, yeah, you're gonna get that awesome revolutionary design.
Okay, it just finished. Let's see how it looks. Blow some dust off. That looks pretty good. There you go.
That is so awesome. Look at that.
So that's the benefits of bringing it to the digital age, or the new industry 4.0, as you would say, or manufacturing 4.0. So it's really neat, really excited.
I've actually been part of that research where your limb gets measured by these special things and then it goes into an algorithm. So I think that technology is actually pretty close to becoming a reality, where you go and you get an MRI scan and then you will basically have your flesh probed and the computer will calculate exactly how the socket needs to work.
Well, it's about pushing boundaries, and those boundaries really need to be pushed at this time, you know?
Not every prosthetic needs to be designed like, I'm going to go hiking for half a day on it. It could literally be, an item that I'm able to, for example, only perform something when I'm like suspended on air and I can walk a little bit.
It's fun to hear your side of prosthetics, because you are touching on points that we get often forgotten. We see hundreds of legs a week, but when people see like your legs, they're talking like, wow, look how cool this is. Like, this is awesome. Like, it tells a story. So these projects have a lot of reciprocating trickle-down effect for everyday users, which is awesome.
Yeah, you guys are like rocking it. You're like into the stratosphere of like what needs to happen right now.
I think other fields, and especially like, for example, the field of fashion is very hidden. It's almost very closed off. And I think that is really what I love about the field of technology, because you're thinking in such a different level about sort of community aspects. Instead of rivalry, it's about collaboration almost. And that's definitely what the world of makers is all about. It's about collaboration versus competition almost, and that's really being celebrated, and that's a really great thing.
We need cities to have infrastructure to keep materials circulating locally and keep data circulating globally. Put it in simple terms, we're moving from a model of cities that import products and produce trash. So I believe that in Bali, especially, that this is creating a deep reflection on what is the model to follow. What's the way to move on from a pandemic, and what's the way of rebuilding local economies, right? In Bali and in Indonesia.
The soul of this plastic exchange is dignity, which is connection human to the higher being. And then human-to-human connection, and then human to the environment connection. In Bali, we call it Tri Hita Karana. Tri is a three, Hita is happy, and then Karana is the way. How I started this plastic exchange is back in May 2020, when this pandemic started. The first thing that was happening is people lost their job. Like it or not, Bali is 80% is from tourism. And then the other thing that I see also a lot here is the environments with plastic. People said inside of the crisis there's an opportunity. And I was thinking to myself, if they bring me plastic, I will give rice. So I don't want to just people, when there's a disaster, people just like waiting for the handout. I didn't want to have this hand on the bottom and then hand on the top. I really want to bring this hand together. In Bali, we call it tatuamasi, which is the receiver become a giver and a giver become a receiver. So basically, once a month, we hold this event here. And then people bring plastic like this, and need to be separated like this. See? And we write it down like this. Give you a statistic, actually, Indonesia is the second largest polluter of plastic after China. I think plastic action in a really tipping point right now, which is we just need one more straw to break that camel back. So I think you're going to be the straw.
What if I tell you that you can turn plastic into a material to make things? This idea is something that some people call it urban mining. So it's using the same principle of mining, but instead of digging a hole into our planet, we can mine from the things that have already accumulated energy. So in a way, these resources that we consider them waste, they are actually like our new gold in a way. There are other possibilities, which is using technologies such as blockchain.
What ACT does is it uses the blockchain technology, which generally is just like a database which collects data in groups and then chains those data information with a really secured way, distributed way. But let's just say for plastic industry, give a holistic view of what happens with plastic across either different communities, different regions.
I would like for my data to have a credibility. And I think this blockchain technology can do that for us.
A big part of blockchain is regarding the currency or cryptocurrency. So one of them is a non-fungible token, NFT. And we see that we can use that type of token and use that type of technology to really combine with what we're doing here with plastic. And the aim here is to really partner up with the creative community, whether it be artists or craft makers, and really empower them to create artworks that can be then put onto an NFT marketplace platform.
Well, this is how we grew up when I was a kid. Okay. You know, I grew up with a barter system. You know, people gave something, they received something, and you know, this is no different, just now in a digital form.
So what I'm seeing here is that we have the opportunity to really jump into the Fab City Global Initiative or to build a Fab City prototype in Bali without having to create things from scratch. One of the things that we have to understand is that a Fab City is not a city full of Fab Labs. A Fab City is trying to address problems that are far more complex, that are not solved by small workshops with digital fabrication tools. We need really to challenge the way in which corporations, the way in which companies are using these technologies. The way to do this is to give access for people to learn about these technologies, embed in our educational systems new ways of learning. You know, the future is something that it can come to you and you will become the victim of it, or you can be empowered and being able to shape it by yourself. So I'd rather be empowered and not to be a victim of the future that someone else wants to create for me.